Hello everyone, and welcome to By The Fireside. Today, I'm going to read The Faces in the Trees by Anonymous. So, I asked a friend if he knows anyone who had access to some tools I needed to finish a project. He said sure, he knows a guy from work who would be happy to help. Apparently, he was interested in the same kind of art. But he warns me, he's a little bit off. So I drove my friend to work one day, and he introduces me. The guy seems really distant and withdrawn, but he shakes my hand and we chat a little bit. He seems really interested in the woodwork I was doing, and we talked about sculptures and stuff like that for a little while. Things we'd learned, tools we used, etc. The guy warms up a bit, and I ask him if it would be alright if I checked out some of his stuff. He hesitantly agrees, kind of like when you're trying to come up with an excuse, but just can't. He tells me to swing by that night. He says we can chat over a few beers. I say, okay, sure. Later that night I get a call. It's the guy. He sounds a little bit shaken up. Says things are chaotic at home, and right now isn't a good time. He says he'll call me sometime. Whatever, I think. Okay man. Bye. 2 weeks go by. The guy calls one afternoon. He says things have settled down, and he wants me to bring over some of my work as well, to compare and, blah blah blah. Sure dude, I say. So I start to head over, and I notice this guy lives in the middle of fucking nowhere. I had to call him up just to find his house. It's at the end of a long driveway, a beautiful acre plus of land. The driveway is littered with trees, and his house is actually pretty nice. As I come up the driveway, something strikes me as odd about the trees I'm passing by. They all have faces carved into them, facing the driveway. Twisted, pained faces. I didn't think much of it. I make morbid stuff myself, and in fact, I was very impressed. The amount of detail was staggering. Looking out into the tree line of the property, every tree had a pained face looking in on the house. Almost like the woods were watching you, wherever you were. This was actually kind of creepy, and I felt pretty creeped out. Looking out was like seeing 100 or so white faces, just crying out. It was kind of like they wanted your attention. I knocked on the door, and the guy answered with a beer in hand, and a much, much friendlier demeanour than before. He helps me carry some of my stuff in, and he shows me around. The guy seems pretty cool. I begin to notice each room has one of those same damned faces hanging above the door frame. The more I saw them, the more I felt sick. Up close, the faces were more detailed than I had imagined, almost surreal. I asked him what his focus on the faces were for, and the guy kind of tensed up and dodged my question. Upon entering his workshop, which was pretty fucking sweet by the way, he seemed to have other interests besides creepy faces. He had entire 7-foot sculptures of women, men, animals, etc. All very, very well done. And one with a tarp in the back, just chilling there. He says it isn't done yet, so I don't bother. It was right in front of a door that I think led to another room. We begin working on stuff together, trading stories and times we had accidentally injured ourselves. Suddenly, the subject changed. The guy asks me what I think about God. I tell him I'm not very religious, but I don't rule anything out. The guy starts getting a bit loud, saying that God is a blatant lie. He was told so. By who? I ask. He's kind of silent for a moment, then abruptly asks me if I believe in spirits. I gave him kind of the same non-committal answer. It's possible. He starts looking around the room, as if seeing if anyone is around, and then his voice goes soft, and he kind of whispers for a moment. I see things in the woods. At dusk I can see their shadows. Sometimes they whisper from the trees, and I can hear them. Oh dear, I think. Obviously this guy is mentally disturbed. I decide to egg him on. I ask him what they tell him, etc. They tell him that God is a lie. The only thing after death is darkness. He says they laugh at him and leave dead animals at his tree line. I am officially creeped out at this point. He said, for a while, they visited him at night, and each face carving represented a different spirit that had visited him. He says that they can't stand looking at themselves in death, so they don't step within the tree line. That's why he has the entire thing carved out. I've been silent for quite a while at this point. I hadn't had goosebumps so bad since I was a kid, and chills are just running up my spine. He told me that they talk to him from the tree line at night, and they try to get him to leave his home. I eagerly tried to change the subject. The guy looks down and just keeps talking. He's as pale as a sheet, and he was obviously genuinely terrified. He even kind of looks like he's welling up. He tells me I'm the only person he's told. Knowing I'm a stranger, he apologizes. He says he's scared, and he doesn't know what to do anymore. I try my best to awkwardly console this stranger, and the guy actually kind of starts to break down. I think he needs help, but it's not my place to give it to him. I regrettingly ask him why he's afraid. He says the faces don't work anymore, and 2 weeks ago he had something terrible in his living room. I don't know what to say. He walks over to the tarped sculpture and pulls the tarp off to reveal the most mangled, terrible thing I have ever seen. It hardly resembles a human being. It was terrifying to have imagined this guy seeing it standing in his living room. Shortly after that, there's a loud bang on the wall to my right. I nearly jumped out of my skin. This guy doesn't even flinch. Then again, bang! Then it just continued on and on, continuously, like hail hitting a tin roof. The guy screams, "Stop it! Stop it!" and it ceases. After that, I grabbed my shit, I tell the guy I'm sorry, and I got out of there as quickly as possible. As I'm leaving his home and driveway, I look into the rear view mirror. The tree line is darker than I've ever seen. The guy calls a week later, and he apologizes. He says he was silly, and everything is okay now. My friend says the guy quit, and no one ever heard from him again.